Welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Tina Clark. Today's guest is Ryan Christensen. He's an author and a hypnotist and a veteran. And he's going to show us how you end internal conflict and suffering. So I can't wait to hear about this. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so share a little bit more about yourself. And we were just chit-chatting before I pressed record. Sure. He was in the Marines and a military vet and was in an intelligence career in DC. And now he's a hypnotherapist. So tell us how that all happened.
Very different path in life for sure. Like I always say, you've got such an interesting life. Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure how this worked out the way it did, but in a lot of ways, joining the Marine Corps was very much my way of getting out of Kansas. You know, it's just an environment that I was not really meant to be in. Great place to live. You know, hometown was fine. Growing up was fine, but just never really a good fit. So ran away and joined the Marines when I was 21, almost 22 years old. Became a linguist there, spoke Russian professionally there for about 5 years. Left in 2002. Joined the Air National Guard, did air, intelligence support for things like Predators and F-16s and F-22s over the next 6 years. And in 2004, I moved to DC and started working in counter-terrorism, counter-proliferation, did that for about 16 years. About 2019, 2020, really started doing a lot of work on myself. That's kind of like what started my healing journey and my move into the hypnosis space, because I realized, spent 23 years trying to save the world. The world doesn't want to be saved. I'm obviously in the wrong line of work, trying to do something different. And becoming a psychologist would take like 6 years and $500,000. So one of the groups I was in, there's a hypnotist talking about like toxic shame and emotional baggage. I'm like, well, got some of that, raised Catholic. Did a session with him, just felt lighter. You're carrying around 50 pounds of stuff, get rid of 20 pounds, everything's easier. And so got certified in February 2020. Everything shuts down right after. Obviously, I can't work from home because everything I do is classified at the time. So I got nothing but time. Started working with a couple of people online, realized I had a bit of a talent for it. Got some more training, started my business in April and went full-time in October 2020. Been doing it full-time ever since.
Wow, amazing. So what type of hypnotherapy are you trained in?
Well, I'm a hypnotist, not a hypnotherapist. There's a difference here in Texas where you have to be like actually a psychologist or social worker to do hypnotherapy, where it's actually like, oh, we're working on major depressive order, anxiety disorders and stuff like that. I'm just a hypnotist. And fundamentally, the stuff I was trained on is typical hypnosis stuff, but I basically developed my own modality, my own approach, and my own techniques. Hypnosis itself is just a set of techniques that gives me more access to your unconscious mind. That's it. The magic is, what do you do when you're down there? And it's very much about finding a set of tools and techniques that kind of match your individual talents and worldview. And I'm an intel guy, right? Typically, when we talk about hypnosis, I'm going to throw a bunch of good stuff in there and hope it sticks, right? But you've got a new belief set competing with an old belief set. The old belief set typically wins. So while it's really good for things, shifting things around individual habits like smoking, weight loss, phobias, a lot of stuff like that, really good for like pain control and pain management. It's phenomenal for that. Really good for like creating some new stuff in terms of like new possibility, generating stuff, like give you some more motivation. But in terms of like fixing stuff, not the best tool. We look at things in terms of like generative and restorative. Generative is creating the new stuff, creating new possibilities, breaking up things. Restorative is actually fixing the old stuff. And my focus is more on the restorative side of things. And I look at it very much from the perspective of limiting beliefs, because what we believe determines how we interpret the world, determines how we're able to move through the world, determines our set of options we have available to us. So if we can understand what those limiting beliefs are, why they came to be, then we can do the work to change them, right? Because if there's pattern behavior, there's something that drives it. It has a purpose. Your mind is trying to accomplish something, trying to solve a problem of some kind. Fine. Why guess? I've got access to everything in there. I'm an intel guy. I'm just start asking questions and start poking around, right? It has all the answers. There's no mystery. There's actually nothing to figure out. We just have to ask the right questions in the right way to let it show us what's going on, to let it show us the problem, help us understand why it's doing what it's doing. Great. The other piece that I do that's very different from most hypnotists and hypnotherapists is I focus on kind of that right brain emotional construction rather than the left brain, right? Individual issues, individual problems, individual events, individual traumas. That's kind of where we focus so heavily because it's easiest to see. That's kind of looking at the trees rather than the forest, right? And your mind is looking at things from both perspectives simultaneously, right brain, left brain, emotional and rational. And if you don't look at how those emotional beliefs are constructed, if you don't look at that right brain construction, then these things keep playing out. So I'm not good enough just keeps up showing up in a million different ways. I don't deserve shows up in a million different ways. But that's just a belief. There's a chain of logic that created that. So why not just go for that? Right? If there's a big box in your head, the label on the side says I'm not good enough, and there's a million things in the box, typical approach, take stuff out to put it in a different box. But there's a million things in there, and more stuff gets added all the time. So that never ends, right? Which is why healing is a lifelong process. But there's a label on the box. Why not just take off I'm not good enough, put on I am good enough. Now everything in the box means I'm good enough, and you're done with it. Right? For me, there has to be a finish line. There has to be a point where you're healed, where you're fixed, where you're done. Right? Anything less, I'm like, why are you willing to accept less than that? You know, there has to be a way to get there. Why not find how to get there? Why put up with, okay, good enough, better, not fixed, right?
Right. So how do you change the label on the box?
Well, fundamentally, that's that process of like, okay, I'm not good enough became something you believed. Great. It was a conclusion you drew based on a bunch of stuff that's happened, right? Because that part of your mind is looking at patterns of, patterns over time, narratives that run through things. Great. So show me a few examples of how I'm not good enough came to be. Right. Great. So you're 5 years old, you're on the playground, Billy runs by, punches you, laughs at you, runs away. Right? Okay, great. So you feel like, nobody likes you and, you can't protect yourself and all this stuff. Sure. But that's how you understood things when you were young. Right. But if there's something wrong with you, if nobody likes you, if you don't be loved, then obviously you're not good enough. Right. So if we go back and show, okay, well, that's the way that boys are back then. And they didn't punch you because they didn't like you. They punched you because they're trying to get your attention, because that's how boys flirt when they're 5 years old, because we're stupid. Right. That's just how that is. Mm-hmm. Well, that means it's not that you weren't good enough or that nobody liked you. It's that he liked you. You weren't good enough. You just didn't understand. So we go from I'm not good enough to I am good enough. Right. And it's just that simple. Excuse me. The process and the way to kind of target that and to construct things in such a way to get access to that particular belief is a little bit tricky. But once you understand it, it's just the same thing of like asking the right questions, putting the puzzle together, do the reframing, and that's it. Right.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this is you can find evidence for anything. So you could find evidence for not being good enough, but you can also find evidence for being good enough. And it's all what you're focusing on.
To some degree, but let me put it this way. Do you have to stand in front of the bathroom mirror and tell yourself you're a woman in the morning? Of course not. That's ridiculous, right? You do Reiki, right? So do you have to say, oh, I believe in energy and Reiki? No, that's ridiculous, right? Because you already believe it.
Right.
So you don't have to prove things to yourself that you believe. So the only time we have to prove things is when we don't believe them. Why do we want to look for evidence that we're good enough? Because we don't feel like we are. So the fact that those two things are there because we're looking for evidence for the good enough is why it means we believe that we're not good enough. We're trying to create a different answer, trying to prove a different answer, right? But that's looking at individual trees, not the forest. Say, okay, great, I've got 100 reasons why I'm good enough. Sure, but here's 100 reasons you're not, and there's the other 1,000 underneath that you can't see, right? Sure, you're good enough now, but have you always been good enough? I've been good enough for 5 years, but I'm 4 years old. So like, that means like what, 1/8 of my life I've been good enough and 7/8 I haven't been. So that means I've been going down and I'm still in the negative. I'm not even zero yet. Right. And that's part of the tricky part is that part of our mind, that right brain is looking at such a broader view of us. Right. It's looking at such a broader view that yes, these things are good now, but they haven't always been. So the overall conclusions when you look at your life is not good enough. You're good enough in this facet. Awesome. You're absolutely crushing as an entrepreneur. You got millions of dollars, but the rest of your life sucks. Your relationships are a mess. Your health is a mess. You're absolutely a jerk. Okay, great. Sure. You're good enough this way. Are you good enough across this entire spectrum? Right. And because it's looking at it from that perspective, that's why it's saying, yes, this piece works. You've been through this time. Sure. Absolutely. But I don't know if when you look at the holistic across lifetime, across history, across the shape of your life, right? It's where we get trapped. That's why it's so frustrating. It's because we're trying to fight against this huge construction with this huge perspective that we can't possibly understand on a rational conscious level.
Yeah. So going through hypnosis helps you uncover that.
Yeah, that's the tool that I use because fundamentally that's a process that's in your unconscious mind. The only way to play with it is to get down in your unconscious mind. Hypnosis is a tool that lets me do that. The only other tool that really lets you play down there is psychedelics, but they're going to take you on their own right. Right? You don't get to choose what you go down there and play with, right? And you've only got the tools you're bringing down with you. So your own frameworks that you already have, the tools you already have, and there's limits to what you can do with it down there because, again, you're on that ride, right? You don't control that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So there's massive limits in terms of like what you can actually change while you're down there. Once the ride's over, you're back in your conscious state. Door to your unconscious mind is closed again. Can't touch that stuff anymore. So all the work you're doing is like, now that I understand this stuff about myself, how do I navigate? How do I make new choices? Right? That's that integration process, right?
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally, that's a generative process, right? You're creating a possibility. You're getting new awareness. You're giving yourself the ability to do new choices. You're not doing a lot of restorative work. You're not really fixing a lot of stuff while you're down there, right? But to me, psychedelics and hypnosis play this beautiful game where it's like, okay, so psychedelics show you, okay, here's what's actually going on. Awesome. Now that I know what the problem set is, now I know what's really going on. Great. We use hypnosis to go down, target this stuff, and fix it directly.
Yeah. And the big challenge is to find out what it is, you know.
Solving problems. Yeah. Solving problems is easy once you know what the problem is. The hard part is trying to figure out what the heck is the problem.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So one of the most helpful questions to ask when you're trying to get to the root cause of anything is, when was the first time I felt this way?
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. One that's really good for figuring out this stuff over here, right? Again, that left brain thing, right? But if you're looking at those larger constructions, it's never about one event, never about one moment in time. It's about the 150,000 things that happen to you over the first like 5-10 years of your life, right? The question I really love asking is, what am I missing? Right? I understand these things, but if I was right about the way things were, I'd be getting the result I want, and I'm not. So what am I missing? Right? I did this thing. I was supposed to get this result. It didn't get that. What am I missing? Right? Because there's something in there, some assumption you're making or some perception you have that is incorrect in some way. And like that is the thing that's getting in the way of you getting the results you want. That's the thing that's getting in the way of moving through life the way you want to. Right? Asking what am I missing is probably one of the most powerful questions you can ask.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to add about limiting beliefs is whatever you believe in, the universe is going to try to show you that belief is true. It's going to give you,
part of it.
Right? It's going to give you evidence that, yeah, you're right. You're not good enough. Here you go.
Well, and that's, I hesitate to say that that's the case, because that kind of means that the universe is conspiring to continue to limit you. And I don't believe that's the way it works. What I think happens is, if you believe you're not good enough, then you don't really deserve good things. So you don't let yourself have them. Right. And often those situations are a chance, or the way that I perceive it is like, that's the universe saying, hey, I want to put you in a situation to wake you up to the point where you should not be putting up with this. This is the wake up call that don't do this again. Right? It's not confirmation that you're not good enough. It's, hey, you think you're not good enough, you're acting not good enough. Wake up so you can fix this. I'm going to shove this problem in your face and make you face the fact that you don't feel you're good enough, you don't deserve, so that you can then do work on not being good enough and not deserving, so you can then not be here again. Right? The looking back on my life and the stuff that I tolerated is just, oh my God. it's like my life up until the past couple of years was kind of a flaming train wreck in a lot of ways, to be entirely honest, right? But looking back, it's like, okay, well, no wonder I was in that way, in that situation. No wonder I was putting up with this, right? No wonder, I was tolerating this, right? I remember one relationship where getting a lot of really powerful things, some stuff I'd really never gotten before, and putting up with like chaos and anger and a lot of arguments and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, but I've dealt with this since I was a kid. I know how to navigate this. This is a price I'm willing to pay to get this thing I've always needed. Looking at it now, it's like, I should not have been paying that price. I need to have higher standards on a lot of different things. And it's not just this that I need, there's other stuff that I need as well. I need to be looking bigger, right? But I wasn't in a place where I could see that then. It's not a place where I understood myself well enough then. It's not a place where I valued myself well enough then. So of course I couldn't move through the world that way. But now that I understand, now I can see that from a different perspective, it's like, this is the lesson I was actually learning there.
Yeah, and the way the lessons work is they get more dramatic until you make a change. So I'm thinking about, because
Yeah.
we were talking about working for the government,
Yeah.
both of us did, and I used to work for the government, and I would move jobs, and I would get into stranger, worse situations with every job, until finally my very last job, my appendix burst. So talk about your power center and the power
Yep.
flowing out of your body, right?
Yep.
And I said, okay, universe, creator, higher intelligence, whatever you call yourself, I got the message. I got a master's degree in this, but obviously I need to walk away from this because, it almost made me really sick. I mean, I was in a hospital for a week. So I walked away and I said, well, I don't know what to do now. And I just got married, so maybe I'll have some babies. I just
You know what? That's fascinating because in July of 2020, like right between when I started my business and when I quit, like I actually had a ruptured appendix as well.
Yeah.
So there one day I'm in the office, I'm like, man, I feel sick. Like I'm just like, something ain't right. I went home early, waked up the next morning. I was in absolute agony, went to the hospital, and they're like, oh, it's cool. Like you've got a, appendicitis. We're going to go in, we'll do surgery. You'll be fine. And between them saying that, when they actually operated, it ruptured. So me up there, whoa, so stuff all over. So yeah, I spent like 4 or 5 days in the hospital, like IV antibiotics for 24 hours a day. It's a mess.
Yeah, like worst pain ever I've ever experienced. Terrible, horrible. And then, now I do something totally different, just like you. I'm energy healing, and you're hypnosis, and it changed our track. And the track that I was on obviously was not on the track I needed to be on, and I needed to walk away from it. But it took appendicitis to get there.
I hear you. Wake up calls come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, don't they?
Yeah. So we want to pay attention to those little nudges, to those signs, especially if you're unhappy what you're doing. You're not meant to be doing that. And I know for me, growing up, you probably got the advice, join the military, go to college, get a good job, and you'll live happily ever after. Where that never really worked for me very well.
Yeah. And again, I grew up in Kansas, and I knew that like that typical life path there was just never going to work for me. I spent a couple years in college, just like, this is not it. I've got to get out. And military was never really a thing in my family. I was pretty much the first one to do it. Right after that, my brother decided he was going to join too, so my mom was really pissed off because I just got spread it out in the middle. It's like, oh yeah, so I joined the Reserve. Oh, what? And like about the way, it's like Jeff's like, I'm going to go and join. It's like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing here? But after having gone through that experience, they're very proud of both of us for doing that, and it definitely set us on our paths individually. My brother was kind of lost as well, and definitely shipped him up and sent him on the path where he started became a financial advisor, got married, had kids. That whole path took me on my crazy path, exactly where we need to go. But yeah, it's just listening. It's like sometimes you just gotta listen to the signals you're getting, and you don't necessarily have to know why. In fact, it's often better if you don't. It's often better if you don't know why, because then you can be presented with, and you can allow things to unfold in a way and show you things you never would have imagined. Right?
Yeah, you might know the what, but you may not know the why.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not.
You might know any of it,
right? Maybe not ever.
Right. Yep. Well, there's sometimes it was like, just go that way. Ryan, just join the Marine Corps, get the hell out of Kansas. Cool. And then that set me on this massive path I never would have expected. Right. Start doing hypnosis. So, okay. It's like move out of DC. Okay. Austin sounds good. Perfect. Go to this, retreat and do some psychedelics. Okay. Boom. All right. Now I got a whole different set of things I have to play with now. Right. It's just things if you're let go of how things are supposed to look or what you feel they're supposed to be, the world, the universe can show you much bigger things you would have ever imagined.
Right.
That's part of why I don't set goals anymore. People are, oh, here's my 5-year plan. I'm like, okay, But by picking that 5-year
I
plan,
hate that
yeah.
question.
Oh my God, I hate
You
it
know
with a
what my
passion.
answer for that question is? What's your 5-year
What's that?
plan? I'm going to be somewhere amazing in 5 years and better than I could have ever imagined. That's my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan, my 20-year plan.
Mine's like, what's your 5-year plan? I don't know. I'll figure it out. We'll see. We'll see. Well, and the thing is, like, by picking that thing, it's like, okay, you've boxed yourself into one and only one set of possibilities, so you automatically excluded others. And it's the best you can imagine today, not the best you can imagine next week, next month, next year. Right? Why would I limit myself that way?
Yeah, it's funny you said that about the goals, because I have a little, in feng shui, you have the abundant center of your home, right? So I have a plant, I have crystals, I would have like a grid with all my goals, but I notice that I keep asking for the same thing and I haven't accomplished it yet.
Right.
And then things were very in flux last year. Like it was kind of difficult. When you have your own business, you have your ups and downs and everything. And I was like, well, what the heck is going on? So I took out the grid and the goals. And and right now I'm kind of like, well, we'll see. I didn't rewrite new goals. I didn't put like a new grid there. And I'm like open. I'm like, because I feel like, when you have that feeling something's percolating in the background.
Oh yeah.
And it's about
I know exactly what you mean.
To happen. That's the feeling I have.
Yeah. Like I'm very much in that same space where, like, I'm very much in rebuilding phase these days, where found out in June of 23 that I had bipolar disorder. Didn't know. I had a pretty severe episode. So spent like 14, 15 months getting all the medications right to keep myself stable so I actually function. So I've really only been able to work again for like 3-4 months. And when you're self-employed, being out of work for 14, 15 months is not a good situation, right? Tapping into savings and everything else, right? So you're kind of digging yourself out of the hole. And so on the one hand, there's a sort of there's a pressure and an urgency of like, gotta figure it out. And there's this other half was like, no, I'm doing something very different. I'm doing something very special. I'm not supposed to play the normal game. It's going to play out in a different way. You just need to keep doing the things you're doing, and things are going to start dropping into place. Right. So the things that are kind of happening for me right now, it's like, oh, I'm not getting a bunch of clients coming in the door, but I'm making a lot of really interesting connections in like the business mentoring space and the psychedelic space and the veterans communities, which are where I feel I can have like the most impact with the stuff that I do. So I was like, okay, great. Maybe I'm not supposed to be generating all these leads on my own. Maybe I'm supposed to be in the right spaces, having the right conversations to get the right interest, to bring the right people through the door. Fair enough. That's going to be a slower process. Can I keep my head above water for a little bit longer? I can, as long as I need to, right? Because things are sort of coming into view in a way they hadn't been there before, right? And, there's this idea of like systems over goals or principles over rules. Right. Let's talk about how get that high level stuff right, and the smaller stuff kind of handle itself. So if you create the right system, then the results take care of themselves. Right. So for me, I've got this idea of like, okay, if everything I can get anything I want in life, I get everything I want in life if I build the right system to create it. So for me, that has like 3 different components, right? And you look at like almost like a boat going on a journey. First thing is you need a North Star. You got to have that overarching thing that kind of guides you, whatever that is. For me, it's like that pursuit of greatness. I'm pursuing greatness. Greatness is my North Star. What does that mean? I don't know. What does it look like? No idea. Right? It's an archetype. It's a principle. It's like a greatness, right? Awesome. You know what greatness is, even if you can't define it. Fine. I'm pointing that way. Second thing is you need your boat. You need something to carry you in that direction, right? Your mission, your purpose, your business, whatever that happens to be. For me, that's this idea of like ending human suffering, unleashing the fullness of human potential to the maximum possible for me to engineer his lifetime. The beautiful thing about the construction is I don't have to save the world. Right? I don't have to end it and do it. No, it's like I have to get the ball rolling. I have to contribute as much as I can. And if I figure out if I'm doing that, it's going to take me in the direction of greatness. I figure that'll work, right? Then you got to have a navigation system, right? You got to have your compass, your sextant to keep you on track. And that again has 3 components. The first one is to be your authentic self to the maximum extent possible. That's actually the hardest piece. Because a lot of us are doing this healing work because we don't really like who we are. Right? Which means you've got to do that work to like clear out of the junk, actually integrate yourself, line everything up so you are a coherent, integrated whole to where you're not judging yourself anymore. You can just be you. But even along the way, to the extent possible, to the extent you understand, be as authentic as you possibly can. Because that's going to be giving you that truest alignment with wherever you're going. Second thing you got to do is you got to listen. You got all these different parts of yourself, energetic, these different levels of your mind. You got your physical body, right? You got your heart, your soul. They kind of have a different compass, right? Go this way, don't go that way. Pleasure and pain, good and bad, right and wrong, true and false, should not, want, don't want. Great. One of them, as long as everything's lined up, pointing north, keep rolling. You're on the right track. Sooner or later, ones that start getting a little bit squirrely, pointing in a different direction. Awesome. Try and tell you you're not on track anymore in some way. Perfect. In which case you should be listening to that. And then number 3, get curious. Take a step back. Okay, great. You're trying to tell me something. I'm not on track. There's something off. Great. Show me. Trying to show you. It's like, great. Like, fine, cool. We're off track. Great. How?
That's where I'm at right now. I'm in the curious zone,
Yes.
Because I could tell, I kept putting the same goals out and it wasn't really manifesting. So I said, okay, I'm going to step back and see what happens. Allow whatever to unfold in front of me. But the interesting thing about this podcast is business-wise is kind of slow, but this podcast is on fire because the moment I went online and created profiles on Podmatch and Matchmaker, which is how we met.
Yep.
I've been inundated with requests for guests.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that to me is like, okay, Tina, keep doing that.
Yeah. And it's been beautiful. I love these conversations because you get to talk about these things in all kinds of different ways from all kinds of different perspectives, right? You're not having the same conversation over and over again.
Yeah, it's unique to the 2 people involved in the conversation. It's unique to whoever happens to be listening right now that might come away from this conversation with some takeaways, from some aha moments, which would be my goal, to at least get people thinking and curious about hypnosis, for example, as a possible healing modality that you want to try.
Yeah, absolutely. And even within things like Reiki and energy healing and all kinds of different stuff, psychedelics, there's all kinds of different approaches and viewpoints, right? If you just look at psychology, how many different theories are there to play with, right? Look at energetic systems, right? Like I'm more of a tantra guy. That's the thing that is most intuitive for me to play with. You're a Reiki person. You got the Qigong types and the Chinese energetic systems. You got all these other stuff out there too. There's like Egyptian style ones, like all kinds, right? All different theories, all different languages, all different frameworks to play with the same thing, to play with that energetic body in different ways. Great. Got an emotional body, all these different somatic techniques and breath work and such to play with that. Perfect. Hypnosis is just one set of tools and one framework to be playing with different parts of the mind, right? The way I laid it on my book is you've got like a conscious mind, a rational mind, an emotional mind, and an instinctive mind. Got a lot of stuff to play on that conscious and rational space. Not a lot to play it down on that emotional and instinctive, right? That's where hypnosis and psychedelics are really the key, right? And in a lot of ways, we talked earlier about how, it's really easy to solve the problem once you understand what the problem is. Part of that is figuring out where in the whole architecture itself is the problem, right? Is it an energetic problem? Is it a neurochemistry problem? Is it a physical body problem? Are you just having the wrong relationship framework to navigate with? Or is it one of these emotional and instinctive things that you need to dig in with, right? And once you understand where the problem is, okay, great. Now I know what kind of tools I need to leverage to solve that particular problem, right? But you're probably going to have to end up doing work on all the different levels. I definitely have had to, right? Some of the stuff I've had to do 100% energetic, spiritual. I've had to do the psychedelic stuff. I've had to do the somatic stuff. I've had to do all of it along the way, right? And that's just at different points of journey, at different places, you're going to be working on different things in different ways in different spaces. It's just how it goes.
Yeah, it's true. And there is an endpoint for some of this thing. Some of it might take a while. Some of it you might get it the first or second try, which is amazing.
Yep.
And you no longer have that issue anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and fundamentally, I feel like there always should be a finish line. There should be a point at which you're fixed. There should be a point at which you're healed. There should be a point at which you're done freaking working on yourself, and you can just focus on how to live out there. There are problems out there, right? And that's why I'm so focused on those higher level constructions, because if we can fix that stuff, a lot of this little stuff goes away. If this is just I'm not good enough showing up in a million ways, let's just fix I'm not good enough, and then it doesn't show up in a million other ways, right? Kind of like speed runs that process, kind of like gets you over that hump into that endpoint a lot better. We're talking about, ending inner suffering, that conflict between these different parts of our mind, because we're not on the same page, is really what drives a lot of the problems, because we're fighting down there. They can't coordinate with each other, and they can't coordinate with us on a conscious level either. There's that friction between like the CEO and the employees, as well as the different departments, right? So when everybody's fighting, nothing really gets done, right? So by figuring out what's in that way, figuring out what those really problems are, getting those things lined up, and teaching those different parts of your mind how to communicate and work together, now you're working together as a unified whole, and you're doing the proper jobs. The CEO should not be worried about the TPS reports in the accounting department. That ain't his job. He's got people for that. But if the accounting department is messing up, or you think it is, you got to step in. And when you clear all this stuff out, get everything lined up, now the CEO can keep on doing CEO stuff, which is what he should be doing, and he can trust the team to handle everything else.
yes, ideally.
Ideally, that's the goal.
Right.
That's the goal, right? Right. And that's fundamentally, that's where my function is. Like, let's figure out all the stuff down there is not working, clear all that junk out, get everybody on the same page so you can rock and roll.
So can you share some examples of how hypnosis has helped yourself or maybe some of your clients overcome some challenges or experience some healing as a result?
Sure. So again, I do very specific work. It's very programmatic. I take my clients to a particular endpoint, right? Where the core belief set is essentially, there's nothing wrong with me and there never was. There's nothing to heal and there never was. I'm good enough as I am to deserve whatever I choose, and I don't have to prove it to anybody, not even myself. All right. Fundamentally, one of the biggest beliefs that messes us up is this idea that emotions are pain. Emotions are pain. They come from emotional wounds. They're caused by emotional trauma. Great. When you're navigating life through that perspective, and it's the most natural conclusion to draw, especially when you're young and experiencing a lot of this negative emotion. Well, now there are a couple of different things happen. Number one, your survival part of your brain has to get activated, and it has to treat your emotional state as a threat to your physical survival, because in a lot of ways it is. Look at deaths of despair. That's exactly what that is your emotional state ending up ending your life through whether that's, taking yourself out or alcohol or drugs or whatever that happens to be. The second thing is you can't engage with it because you're supposed to move away from pain, which means it's really hard to figure out what's going on. So one of the things we have to do is change emotions from pain to something else, and change them from pain into questions, right? Where every negative emotion you experience is your mind asking, say, hey, I'm facing this kind of a challenge. I need your help solving this kind of a problem, right? You're afraid. Great. That's because there's something out there that's messing with you. You need to get away from it. Feeling shame, fair enough. You failed to measure up to a standard in some way. Great. Is that the right standard? And if so, how do I need to measure up? Right. So rather than being things you need to run from, they're actually helping you figure out how to navigate the world better. Which means that you can engage with them and they actually help you. It also means they don't come from wounds, so you're done healing. And not only you're done healing, there was anything to heal in the first place, right?
Yeah, I like that, because my approach with my clients is I ask a lot of questions.
Exactly.
And it's not really what happened to you or, all the terrible things or, I ask a lot of questions. When did this start? What were you doing at the time? No one ever asked themselves these things. When you have a health problem show up, it doesn't randomly show up. You have to look at what were you struggling with at the time. Even the body will tell you who it could be. It could be a male, it could be a female, from the location of the pain in the body.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So
100%.
I ask a lot of questions, and they may not be able to answer it, unfortunately, because they may not remember if it was a long time ago. But if they actually focused on when it all began, things start clicking and they start connecting and understanding.
Yep.
That's
100%.
why it started then.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
So one of the first steps is we get this idea of pain, changing into questions. Perfect. Now we can actually move in a different way. Trauma takes on a very different meaning. Trauma is just a situation where you're facing a challenge. You're in some kind of situation where you couldn't find a way to win. Mind screaming at you for help, trying to find an answer, didn't have one. That's it. Right. The other thing is when your hand hurts, you're supposed to look at your hand because that's the thing that's busted. You need to fix that. Where do we feel emotions? Feel them in here. It's got to be busted. This. That's why we're always trying to fix ourselves.
Yeah, we actually feel it all over.
Right, right. But fundamentally, it's in us.
Mm-hmm.
So where the thing has to be broken, therefore where the thing that has to be fixed. And when we talk about emotions, if they're not pain, they're questions. Well, then this isn't where the problem is. It's out there. And the beautiful thing is, when you need to fix yourself or you need to heal yourself, that means you're broken. Broken things aren't really valuable. It's hard to have healthy self-esteem in that space. But once you change these things, now we can create value. But we have to do it in a way that doesn't have to be measured, because if you're measuring, the answer could always be not enough. Which is why good enough to deserve whatever I choose. Don't have to prove it to anybody, not even myself. So you stop having to look for evidence. You say, no, that's my choice. I've made that choice. I don't need to justify it to myself anymore. And this has helped people with like all kinds of different trauma, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual abuse, people who are just like stuck in their life, people who grew up in poor situations where they can never get where they needed, people who are like people pleasing, throwing yourself under the bus, making everybody else happy rather than you because you don't really matter. These things shift massively, right? Like I had this really successful entrepreneur, the guy's like 7-8 figure kind of guy, and he's not satisfied because he's living for everybody else. In these relationships with his ex-wife is like, just take everything. As soon as he asked her to step up and do something, oh, cool, I'm out. Right? Just absolutely just surrounded by vampires. Like, okay, why? Because he doesn't matter. Because he's trying to buy all the affection and everything he needs by doing everything else. Why? Because he can't give them to himself because he doesn't deserve it. Cool. You shift those things. Great. Now I deserve it. Great. Now I can actually have better partners. One guy, a lot of physical ailments, a lot of medical issues, essentially made like life not really worth living. Can I fix those medical issues? No, but I can fix that perspective. Sure, I'm dealing with stuff. Great. Doesn't have anything to do with who I am. I get to live life. I get to enjoy it to the extent that I can. And like a couple weeks after we finished up, like he got a new job, like double his salary. Right. Had one lady, massive abandonment issues all of her life, really kind of stuck professionally. Did this work for her. She got engaged to her boyfriend like 2 weeks later, cranking out everything on a creative level in ways she hadn't before. Right.
Yeah.
Massive shifts. Why? Because you're done blaming yourself. You're done beating yourself up. You're done fighting yourself. There's nothing to hide from anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing to be ashamed of. You integrate all that stuff. And it's a beautiful space.
Yeah. So it sounds very similar to a lot of the results I see with Reiki, except we're not identifying, we're not going into the subconscious. It's just that your energy field is filled with this. It's filled with your emotions. It's filled with your thoughts, your beliefs. And so what the Reiki does is it flushes out your energy system. So what happens? You flush out what doesn't serve you anymore, and you have space for something new within your energy field. And that's why people change their lives after Reiki sessions or hypnosis sessions.
Absolutely. Like I said, you got these different parts of self, the energetic body, flushing stuff out there. Great. That's going to open up that entire space. Flushing out that emotional instinctive mind. Great. That's going to open up that space. Right. And for me, it's like, if you've got all these different bodies, like to me, like self is soul. That's what you are, is your soul. It's kind of like projecting through, manifesting through, expressing yourself through all these different stuff. So the more parts of yourself you can clear out, line up, then the more powerfully and more authentically self and soul can flow through. Mm-hmm. So it's about addressing those things on each of those different levels, clearing it out, lining everything up, getting out of the gunk all the way so that you can flow most powerfully and most authentically through every level of self in every possible way.
And I find that people's readiness has something to do with how fast the healing happens.
Or if it happens at all.
Yeah. I find the people who've tried everything and nothing has worked, I love working with those people.
You and me both.
Because
You and me both.
they are ready. They are
They're like,
ready,
I don't
and
care.
that's when
Yeah.
miracles happen,
Yep.
because they've
Yep.
tried everything else and it didn't work.
Yep. Yep. And the thing about that is, number one, they tried everything, nothing's worked, which means they're not satisfied with that. They're not willing to settle for that.
Right.
Right. Which is a huge piece, because a lot of people, well, I tried everything. I guess this is the best I can do. Okay. Maybe. And number two, it means that they are absolutely hungry for transformation and change in a way that's like, I refuse to settle for anything else.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. And that's a powerful space. That's a powerful space.
It is, because you are open to possibilities. And that's when, to me, that's the space of miracles. That's when miracles happen.
100%. 100%.
So Ryan, can you share a little bit about what you're working on right now and how people can get in touch with you?
Sure. So the best place to start is my book. It's called Winner Peace, kind of like Inner Peace, but Winner Peace, because I don't think you should have to sacrifice success in order to have that fulfillment. How to end inner conflict and make success inevitable. It's on Amazon, all the different formats, to include Audible. And it kind of like tells you exactly how to get to that space. So I'm saying, where it's like, nothing wrong with you, nothing heal, good enough, rock and roll, all those different parts of your mind on the same page, moving forward. Handles a lot of those reframing of the common beliefs and kind of how we get there in the beginning. So to the extent that I can get you there, in a book is designed to help you do that on your own. When you're ready to do the deep work, if you feel that's something you need to do or something you're called to do, my website is www.ryanthehypnotist.com. For free 45-minute consultations, sit down, take a look at like what's happening in your life, what's been going on, show you kind of like where all that's coming from and why, and we can talk about getting you that place where you really want to be.
Great. So if you want to work with Ryan, all that information is going to be in the show notes. And thank you again for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.